So, well, they have this white button. We'd have to bring them both out at the same time. How far in would you like to go with it then?
I would go in about 3 or 4 inches. I go in.
4 inches. And then
Can you do it without rope and tape?
not that far out. How far? So that all the cables and stuff, it would be bumped up there. We can try it.
Yeah, I'm looking right at people, you know?
Is that what you want?
Seems
Yeah,
good.
that one at
Yeah, yeah.
inches.
Yep. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. The new Ian. He's the new boss man.
How tall is
I can. It looked right to me, but
Can I turn on something? How come they changed it to small? You had it in mirror because of the light earlier.
no. Staff said no. And it's
Okay.
gonna be. It's gonna be.
Did you explain to them why?
It's not in the lights though.
Yeah, but when he camera.
It's fine.
Oh, this one is turned off.
No. I didn't know she put stuff on there. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it looks okay to me.
Did you show this?
No.
Distinguished guests, please welcome the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine. Distinguished guests, please welcome the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine.
And the United States, enhancing interoperability between our militaries in line with NATO standards, investing in Ukraine's defense industrial base so in time they can supply their own weapons and munitions, working with Ukraine's partners to build a future force that is strong, sustainable, and resilient, and supporting Ukraine's economic recovery as well as its energy recovery after Russia has repeatedly targeted Ukraine's energy grid with massive attacks in the futile attempt to break the will of the Ukrainian people. All these lines of efforts and others are laid out in this agreement. Additionally, the G7 achieved a significant outcome this week on the matter of Russia's frozen assets in Europe and other places outside of Russia. Back in 2022, 2 days after Russia's invasion, members of the G7 and the European Union worked together to freeze $280 billion in Russian central bank funds outside of Russia. I'm very pleased to share that this week, the G7 signed a plan to finalize and unlock $50 billion from the proceeds of those frozen assets, to put that money to work for Ukraine. Another reminder to Putin, we're not backing down. In fact, we're standing together against this illegal aggression. The agreement that President Zelenskyy and I just signed also lays out our shared vision for a just peace, a peace rooted in the UN Charter and the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, a peace with a broad base of support around the world that holds Russia accountable for the damage it has done in this war. We will see this vision strongly affirmed at the historic peace conference happening in Switzerland this weekend, where Vice President Harris will represent the United States. Finally, this agreement accelerates Ukraine's integration into the European and transatlantic communities. It includes major commitments from Ukraine to implement democratic, economic, and security reforms in line with the European Union's accession goals and NATO's programs of reform. While we take this step, the United States is also intensifying pressure on Russia. Yesterday, the U.S. Treasury Department made clear any bank anywhere in the world that deals with sanctioned Russian banks, companies, or individuals risk being sanctioned themselves. And we announced roughly 300 new sanctions on individuals and companies that are helping Russia with the war effort. They include key parts of Russia's financial sector. I'll wait till it goes over. as well as individual and entities that supply Russia with items critical to its defense production, like microelectronics, machine tools, and industrial materials. We also sanction more Russian future energy projects, that Russia's natural gas oil projects that are under construction and are not yet fully operating. Putin is counting on revenues from these projects. Our sanctions will disrupt those plans. Plus, at the G7, we discussed our shared concern about countries like China, who are supplying Russia with materials they need for their war machine. And we agreed to taking collective action to push back against that activity. Let me close with this. We've taken 3 major steps at the G7 that collectively show Putin he cannot wait us out. He cannot divide us. And we'll be with Ukraine until they prevail in this war. First is the bilateral security agreement just signed. Second, historic agreement to provide $50 billion in value from Russian sovereign assets to Ukraine. And third, an agreement to ensure our sanctions efforts disrupt third countries that are supplying Russia's war efforts. That will increase pressure on the Russian economy. Collectively, this is a powerful set of actions and will create a stronger foundation for Ukraine's success. 2.5 years ago, Putin unleashed a brutal war in Ukraine, and it's been a horrifying ordeal for the Ukrainian people who are so brave and incredible. It's also been a test for the world. Would we stand with Ukraine? Would we stand for sovereignty, freedom, and against tyranny? The United States, the G7, and countries around the world have consistently answered the question by saying, yes, we will. We will say it again. Yes, again and again and again. We're going to stand with Ukraine. And thank you, and I now yield to my friend from Ukraine, President.
Thank you so much, Mr. President Biden, dear President, dear journalists, dear Ukrainians, dear Americans, and thank you so much. Thanks, Italy and Georgia, for an invitation. Dear friends, today is a truly historic day, and we have signed the strongest agreement between Ukraine and the U.S. since our independence. And this is an agreement on security and thus on the protection of human life. This is an agreement on cooperation and thus on how our nations will become stronger. This is an agreement on steps to guarantee sustainable peace, and therefore it benefits everyone in the world, because the Russian war against Ukraine is a real global threat. I thank you very much, Mr. President, for your leadership, which is reflected in particular in this agreement and in your years of support for Ukraine. I thank our teams, both teams. Thanks very much for making sure that the details of the agreement are really good. And of course, I want to thank every Ukrainian soldier, all our people whose courage made this level of alliance between Ukraine and the United States possible. And I'm proud of our people and what Ukraine can do, and I'm very grateful to all Americans, to everyone in America who strengthens American leadership. So, under the points of the agreement, first, the agreement contains a very detailed, legally binding part, and this means the credibility of America's support for our Ukrainian independence. Secondly, security commitments from the United States are based, among other things, on the sustainability of security and defense support, not only for the duration of this war, but also for the period of peace after the war. And we will definitely ensure peace. Third, it clearly states that America supports Ukraine's efforts to win this war. Fourth, the agreement has good provisions on weapons for our defense, whereas specifically on the Patriot systems, whereas specifically on the supply of fighter squadrons to Ukraine. That's right, plural squadrons, including but not limited to F-16s. We have worked for a long time for this. The agreement is also very specific about the supply of the necessary weapons, joint production, and strengthening of the defense industries of our countries through our cooperation. And this is something that will not only provide security, but also new, good jobs for Ukrainians and Americans. The agreement also outlines what is needed in terms of intelligence information. The agreement contains key aspects of protecting the lives of our people. Fifth, it is very important that the agreement also addresses the issue of Russia's just responsibility for this war and its attempts to destroy Ukrainians. America supports both fair compensation for the damage caused by Russian strikes and working out ways to ensure that frozen Russian assets are used to protect and rebuild Ukraine. The agreement also includes sanctions and export controls that will make Russia feel the pain for what it is doing against the freedom of peoples. And two more things. I'm grateful that the philosophy of our security agreement is in fact the philosophy of the alliance, and that is why the issue of NATO is covered through the text of the agreement. It states that America supports Ukraine's future membership in NATO and recognizes that our security agreement is a bridge to Ukraine's membership in NATO. It is very important for all Ukrainians and for all Europeans to know that there will be no security deficit in Europe which tempts the aggressor to war and makes the future uncertain. Now we are clearly defining everything. We will cooperate for the sake of victory, make peace guarantees effective, and provide the necessary security for our people. And thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership in the G7's decision on 50 billion loan for Ukraine. It's a vital step forward in providing sustainable support for Ukraine in winning this war. Russian immobilized assets should be used for defending lives of Ukrainians from Russian terror and for repaying the damage aggressor caused to Ukraine. It's fair and absolutely right. Mr. President, thank you, your team. I would also like to thank the United States Congress for their support, both parties, both chambers. Thank you, and thanks to every American heart that does not betray freedom and supports us. Slava Ukraini!
Now what we'll do is we're going to take two questions from American reporters and a question each from two American reporters and a question each from two Ukrainian reporters. The first person I'm to call on is Colleen Long of the Associated Press.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. President. About 2 weeks ago, you changed course to allow Ukraine to fire U.S. weapons into Russia. Given the reported successes, would you consider further expanding the parameters on U.S. weapons into Russia, even despite your concerns about escalation? And on the news from home, you're going through something that so many American families go through, the intersection of addiction and the criminal justice system, but you're not like most families. Was your son able to get a fair trial? Do you believe the Justice Department operated independently of politics? And for President...
Let me answer your question and you ask his question, okay? With regard to the first question, it is clear that the near abroad, meaning just across the line of the border with Russia and Ukraine, that it makes a lot of sense for Ukraine to be able to take out or combat what is coming across that border. In terms of long-range weapons, longer-range weapons into the interior of Russia, we have not changed our position on that sort. With regard to the question regarding the family, I'm extremely proud of my son Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know, And I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
President Zelenskyy, a number of leaders here in Italy, including President Biden, are facing upcoming election challenges. How will the security agreement signed tonight and the other promises of support continue if they are not in office? And what's your contingency plan if they don't?
Дякую вам за запитання. If I can I answer in Ukrainian language? Yes, thank you so much. Передусім, я хочу подякувати народам всіх країн, безумовно, Сполученим Штатам, країнам Європи, інших континентів, які нас підтримували з самого початку абсолютно несправедливої війни Росії проти людей України. І саме так вони вбивали людей. Домівки, територія, все це дуже важливо, це частина життя, але перш за все люди, життя людей. Розумієте? Так, і тому ця війна була несправедлива з самого початку. Війна цього зла, ім'я його Путін, проти людей України. І він вбив дуже багато людей. Казати, що це не він, що це військовий, це інструмент для нього. Розумієте, він грає на цьому інструменті. І тому для нас дуже важливо було, що з самого початку нас підтримали люди, народи, тому що вони зрозуміли, що ми поділяємо спільні цінності, ми просто хочемо жити, і люди розуміли, вони уявили, що буде, якщо на них нападе таке зло. І тому нас люди підтримали. І я дякую і президенту Байдену, і іншим лідерам, які з самого початку вторгнення Путіна почали нас підтримувати. Вони базуючись на своїх цінностях. Вони базувались на голосі їх людей, їх народів. І без народу це неможливо. І я впевнений, цей народ обирає собі лідерів, обирає президентів. І мені здається, що кого б не обрав народи, передусім, мені здається, все залежить від єдності всередині тієї чи іншої держави. І якщо з нами буде народ, то будь-який лідер також буде з нами в цій боротьбі за свободу.
Want to call on a Ukrainian reporter?
Yeah, with pleasure. Thank you so much. Так, будь ласка, телеканал Інтер.
Irina Ivanova, Inter TV channel Ukraine, and I have a question for both leaders. So today, during the G7 meeting, the discussion focused on developing Ukraine's air defense system based on the most advanced Western complexes and also on enhancing long-range capabilities. So my question is, can you provide any details on the initiative and about the readiness of our allies to take part in it? Thank you.
I'd be happy to respond to that. We have acquired commitment from 5 countries so far for Patriot batteries and other air defense systems, as well as we've let it be known to those countries that are expecting from us air defense systems in the future, that they're going to have to wait. Everything we have is going to go to Ukraine until their needs are met, and then we will make good on the commitments we made to other countries.
I think President Biden already answered your question. Really, he knows, and all other partners, they know that urgently we need 7 Patriot systems. Yes, to save our cities, not all of them, it's a pity, but urgently 7. And we discussed the possibility of having 5 of them. It's true, but the partners work on it. It doesn't mean that tomorrow we will have these 5 systems, but we see in the closest future good result for Ukraine.
You'll have some relatively quickly. American reporter, Josh Weingrove, Bloomberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a question for President Zelenskyy shortly on the announcements, but if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about your discussions on the situation in Gaza here at the summit. You were asked just a short time ago about it. after the skydiving demonstration. Can you give us your assessment of Hamas's response? And do you believe that they are trying to work towards a deal, or is this response working against a deal? And what is your message to allies, including those here at the G7, about what more, if anything, the U.S. can do to drive towards a peace agreement? Thank you.
I wish you guys would play by the rules a little bit. I'm here to talk about a critical situation in Ukraine. You asked me another subject. I'll be happy to answer it in detail later. But the bottom line is that we've made an agreement. I've laid out an approach that has been endorsed by the UN Security Council, by the G7, by the Israelis, and the biggest hang-up so far is Hamas refusing to sign on, even though they have submitted something similar. Whether it now that comes to fruition remains to be seen. We're going to continue to push. I don't have a final answer for you.
And to President Biden's point, a question about today's discussions. President Zelenskyy, the $50 billion today, you've had the supplemental, of course, from the U.S. Congress recently. Can you give us an assessment of the situation on the battlefield right now, and what has been given now? How long will this get you in terms of either stopping the Russian advance or making headway on this? And how long will it last you if indeed future leaders or current leaders are unable to reach consensus on further aid packages? And President Biden, I'd welcome your assessment of the situation currently on the battlefield and what difference the supplemental has made as well, sir. Thank you.
Дякую за ваше запитання. Ми дійсно очікували фундаментального пакету підтримки в Конгресі Сполучених Штатів Америки. І ми дійсно, це була велика пауза для наших воїнів передусім. Але важливо, і ми вдячні, що наприкінці ми маємо цей пакет, і це точно посилить наших воїнів. Так, це дало можливість за цю паузу 6-8 місяців ворогу спробувати окупувати Харків. Але ця спроба була зупинена нашими воїнами. Була дана відсіч і, незважаючи ні на що, зірвали їх всі плани. Мені здається, що це найголовніше. Що дає цей пакет, який прийде? Цей пакет дає можливість укомплектувати ті резерви, тих хлопців, ті бригади, які готові, для того, щоб вони можливість дали ротаціям, щоб ті хлопці, які втомлені, які на полі бою, щоб могли вони відпочити, щоб могли бригади відновитись, щоб замість них вийшли інші бригади з технікою. Ось що дає цей пакет. І підняття морального духу, і підняття сили наших бригад. Мені здається, що це найголовніше. Наскільки це вистачить? Дивіться, ми без пакету тримались 8 місяців. І ніякого успіху у русських не було. І тому питання, наскільки вистачить, мені здається правильніше, наскільки вистачить єдності в світі, єдності в Сполучених Штатах разом з європейськими лідерами. Як будуть впливати ті чи інші вибори на цю єдність? Мені здається, на це потрібно дивитись саме так. Зберегти єдність, зберегти цілісність світу, цілісність демократичного світу. Тому що, якщо не витримає Україна, не витримає, я впевнений, демократія багатьох держав.
By the way, the idea that we had to wait till we passed the legislation overall, even held up by a small majority of our Republican colleagues, was just terrible. And there's a lot more money coming beyond what's already come in the other tranches that are available now that we've passed the legislation. So they'll have what they need and get it there as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Telegraph, будь ласка. Telegraph, please.
Good evening. My name is Yaroslav Zharinov, Telegraph UA. Thank you for this opportunity. I have a long way from Kiev and have enough time to prepare such long question. Firstly, to Joe Biden. Mr. President, the additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act that you signed mandated the submission of strategy war for the war in Ukraine within 45 days after its enactment. This deadline passed on June 8th, and now yet the international community has not seen this strategy. Has it been developed? And if the strategy is classified, what steps does your administration plan to take to hasten Ukrainian victory in the war? It's my first question. The second will be to the President.
What was the last part of your question?
Has it been developed, this strategy, and what steps does your administration plan to take to victory Ukraine in the war?
The steps we're going to take to make sure that Ukraine has victory and that Russia does not prevail is continued support. What we just signed. We signed that, and a significant number of nations have signed it. We have convinced the G7, we've got support of the G7, and quite frankly, 48 other countries. We sat with the Prime Minister of Japan, South Korea. We have 50 nations who signed up beyond the NATO and the G7. And so we're going to stay as long as it takes. With regard to the plan, that is a plan in process now. We're discussing with our Ukrainian friends exactly what it would be. We have a lot of movement toward that. We know the outlines of it. We have not done the detail of it all. But we know what Ukraine is capable of doing when given the material to defend themselves, and that's exactly what they're doing now.
І друге запитання до президента Зеленського, буде українською. Останнім часом ви зробили ряд досить різких заяв на адресу Китаю, і при цьому в пресі поширюються чутки про можливий початок поставок китайського озброєння до Російської Федерації. Окрім цього, Китай, ймовірно, просуває власний мирний план серед інших країн. Які мотиви у Пекіну зараз? Чи можливо, на вашу думку, переломити бачення Китаю і яка в цьому роль Сполучених Штатів? Ну і, мабуть, фінальне запитання. Чи є, на вашу думку, Китай спільником Росії у війні проти нашої нації? Дякую.
Skilke. Too many questions. Okay, but yes, I understood that your trip was long. First of all, I had phone conversation with the leader of China by phone. He said that he will not sell any weapon to Russia. That is the first. We'll see with you. We'll see. But he said to me, if he is a respectable person, he will not, because he gave me the word. The second, you know very good with details our peace formula. It's very open for everybody, basing on charter. Yes, UN nation, and you know that it bases on next principles: territorial integrity, sovereignty, nuclear security, food security. If China has alternative view on it, it can prepare alternative peace formula. If we share common views on it, like with globally with all the world, I think so. So if they share the same way to peace, we will find dialogue.
By the way, China is not supplying weapons, but the ability to produce those weapons and the technology available to do it. So it is, in fact, helping Russia. Thank you all so very much. Appreciate it.
This concludes our press conference. Thank you, everybody.